I'd like to call the January 29, 2022 special call council meeting for the city of Lake City to order. If everyone would stand for the pledge of allegiance, remain standing for the invocation.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your many blessings. We thank you for looking after our community. We ask your guidance in what we do, betterment for the city and our community. We ask that you continue to look after our first responders, our troops, our citizens, and in your name we pray. Amen. Ms. Sykes, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hill.
Here.
Mr. Jefferson.
Here.
Mr. Sampson.
Here.
Mayor Witt.
Here.
Mr. Dial.
Here.
Mr. Coverline.
Here.
Chief Butler.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Lake City Council has opened its public meeting since 1968. The city code has prohibited any person from making personal and pertinent or slanderous remarks or becoming boisterous while addressing the city council. Yelling or making audible comments from the audience constitutes boisterous conduct. Such conduct will not be tolerated. There is only one approved manner of addressing the city council, that is to be recognized and speak from the podium. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as published?
So moved, Mayor. Second.
Second to approve the agenda as published. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Person wishing to address council, I have Sylvester Warren.
Sylvester Warren, 930 Northeast Joe Coney, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'll be very brief as it relates to Mr. Thomas contract. I've been following some of the news and some of the information about his counter offer of 140. As a citizen and a taxpayer, I just don't want the council to be sticker shocked by his counter offer, and to say that the council and taxpayers have to understand that when you want quality and you want experience, sometimes that comes with a price tag. And so I think looking at his resume, looking at how he interviewed, being a part of the whole process, further having my private investigator, Miss Monica Jordan, do some additional background work on him that I'm personally aware of. I think that you're paying for quality and you're paying for good experience. And with the turmoil and the issues that we find ourselves in, and based on some other things that he's done in other towns similar to ours, I think that 140, at least for me, in my opinion, is cheap. I think I've said to others that for 200,000 with no experience, I wouldn't touch the job. But I love this city, and I think that we shouldn't not be willing to put good money on the table to get us a good experience and good quality management. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Glenn Bowden.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and Council. Glenn Bowden, 1156 Northeast Bascom North Drive. I hate to complain every time I come to the meeting, but I am somewhat concerned when we left the last meeting, Mr. Mayor, I think the workshop attended the schedule for 10:30 on today. I've been attending the city council meetings since 1982, locally and all over the state. I would venture to say I probably attended more workshops and city council meetings than anybody at the diocese, and probably anybody here in Lake City over those period of years, locally and throughout Central Florida and North Florida. And I can't remember many times that I ever attended a meeting on Saturday morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, that was not a special meeting, an emergency, a hurricane, or a tornado. And certainly workshop at 8:30 on Saturday morning. So I guess I want to know from you, Mayor, what's the circumstance that led to this change, if you don't mind asking?
Basically, somebody said, do you mind starting at 8? That people have some obligations later in the day. Can we go ahead since we're having 2 meetings and get started? And I said, yeah, I could do that. I didn't want to get up at 8 o'clock this morning to come here, but we have staff and we have council people and we have the public, and that was the time that was proposed, and I said, fine.
Well, that's fine, it's a done deal, but whoever proposed that, I just couldn't have been thinking about public participation. You know, I just can't, as I said, I've attended a lot of meetings over these past years. And 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday morning, 8:30, when it was already proposed to be 10:30, And then I had already contacted people, hey, listen, there's gonna be some conversation about some money, you might wanna come 10:30 in the morning, oh, I can make 10:30. And go to 8 o'clock, 8:30 after it's already been, just to be 10:30. I think that it was done for, not for the public interest, but for the interest of the city council. That's my personal view. No, I'm just saying, it's not user friendly. Anybody who thinks this downtown is user friendly is out of their mind. I can't, nobody can tell me one time there's been more than 2 meetings in this community, 8 o'clock in the morning, not one. But having said that, I just want to express my dissatisfaction with this timing and for the change, and particularly after it already been noticed, or not noticed, but it's been indicated it's gonna be 10:30. The other point I want to make as it relates to Mr. Thomas, I think that the request for 3 bids on the relocation costs is reasonable. I think that coming from Chicago, unless we know exactly how much he's moving, how big his house is, his apartment, what he's living in, to set a certain price is unreasonable. I think it's fair to him and fair to his family to say, okay, get 3 bids, the lowest bid, then the city take care of the lowest bid. And that's all I have to say, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next is Jerry Leskowitz.
I'm Jerry Leskowitz. I live at 787 Southeast Evergreen Drive in the city of Lake City. And I am here as just one person out of a group of about 3,000 men, women, and children of this city who have been without a council representative in this body for the last 4.5 months. We've had no say in how a new council representative is going to be chosen. And right now, we probably have no say in how a new city manager is going to be chosen. But I'm here to basically put my input in the best I can. Okay. Now, I'm a retired professional engineer. I served 54 years in that capacity, and I have reviewed thousands of resumes of engineers applying for jobs, various different ranks. So I have a little background in analysis of resumes, and I just offer some caution to this body with regard to the very good-looking resume that you have before you. I got a copy of it from the clerk the other day, and I went through his resume, and I noted that about 10 or 11 years passed from the time he got his master's degree in government till he got a substantial job as a city manager. In between that, he lists 2 assignments that he had as county manager, assistant county manager, city manager, assistant city manager at 2 locations in the country, but he didn't give any dates, time frame, or anything about it. One of those was Rockville, Maryland. Rockville, I lived there for 20 years. And Rockville was a town of about, city of about 40,000 when I got there, and it was about 80,000 when I left. I knew my city council member lived right down the street. We were personal friends. He was city council member for 8 years, then he ran for mayor, and he was mayor for 8 more years. I was there from 76 to 96. Okay, I don't know if this gentleman was an assistant city manager during that period of time. I never heard of him, and I worked for the county for about 4 years in an office directly across the street from City Hall. So I'd be more interested in knowing a little bit about what happened in that. What was his level of responsibility? And when he left, was it voluntarily or otherwise? And where did he go from then, and when did he get the next job? And was that when he left after a year, voluntarily or otherwise? So there's a little bit of mystery in the first 11 years. Why did it take so long for him to get to that position? Then the next 11 years are super, as Mr. Warren has stated. Oh my God.
Go ahead for a minute.
He obviously did some tremendous work in those 3 locations, but nothing is said about why did he leave the last job. And it appears he didn't have another one to go to. On those 3 jobs, he went from one to another, which is like, they made him an offer, he left and went to that next one, and then so on. But now there's 6 years at the end of this, up till now, that he hasn't really had much of a record in doing city management. So I think he needs to be vetted, really vetted well, to understand the circumstances of these two gaps in the middle of this tremendous record. The other thing I'll say simply is this, in reviewing resumes, you have to be careful how you read into them what they say. A lot of times people would use like, he had oversight over all of this. Well, an eagle flying at 1,500 feet has oversight over a radius of about 50 miles. What does that mean? Nothing. So same thing here. You know, he can hold a position, but not be actively doing things in that position that involve his decision-making as they go along. He needs to be vetted just to make sure he was the heavyweight and he wasn't just the boss who had a great staff who did all the work for him. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Mr.
Leskowitz.
Mr. Lester.
Yes.
You know, again, thanks for coming out, but I appreciate your comments. But when I hear people that the way you spoke, speak about somebody with experience, well, where were you maybe, Scott Reynolds was city manager? Was you around Lake City then?
No,
Okay, well, anyway,
I've been here about 17 years.
well, that might have been an incident, but anyway, Scott Reynolds was the city manager here, and you know how much experience he had? None, with the GED. But people like yourself, again, I'm not poking, but
No.
comments like that, where was these comments when Scott Reynolds was in that position? Now here we are, hopefully we can get this man with a whole boatload of experience. But there's always seemed to be some type of conflict to come up. But I just wanted to point that out to you.
Okay, well, I say if you do proper vetting and you find out that both ends of the picture are just as good as the middle, I'm fine. I have no problem with that. Just so you do it, just so you make sure, because I have had people fake resumes, try and get a job. Several of them got jobs and had to be let go when it's discovered they didn't have the degree, they didn't have the license or anything that they said they had. Just gotta be careful. This is a big salary you're gonna offer, a lot of benefits that go with this. And you know that the usual lifespan for a city manager is about 3 years. And then half of them leave because they're asked to leave. And because a new set of political figures come into being on the council or commission that runs the government there. So that new ones come in, they don't like what he did before, so they put a motion together to have him released. It's the way life goes. It just happens. You're gonna be giving a big package to this gentleman who you hopefully don't want to have him turn around in 2 years and stick you with a bill, okay?
Well, we've been stuck before with the city manager that came here. He stayed for a while. And if you look at that crap across the street, the city is still putting that bill for that. Not the one we just got rid of, but the one before him.
Yeah.
And he has experience. So, but again, these type of comments and questions didn't come up with certain individuals. What I'm trying to say.
Okay, I'm not saying he's not what he says he is. I'm just saying, based on my experience and the circumstances, you really need to check him out good on some of these issues, okay? We in this city are getting into a situation just like the national governments and the state governments. A real break between the two political parties. They don't talk to each other. They hate each other. They speak irreverently about each other. And that's what we're starting to do here. We're starting to go that direction. So the city manager has to be able to deal with that. Okay? I don't know how he's gonna solve it, but he has to be able to deal with it. Maybe he's dealt with it in the past. He's got those credentials that he can bring here to help keep a problem here getting out of control.
Just give him a chance.
All my comments are, yeah, give him a chance, but before you sign the dotted line to the contract, make sure you know what you're signing.
Okay, let's move on to New business discussion possible action contract terms for Thomas Thomas. In our packet, we have an email about Thomas, in response to our email to him. And discussion by council.
Mr. Mayor, so the email that came back, I think there's a couple points. We had offered 120 as the base salary, which, we had budgeted last year 130. 140 is above that budget. That's one thing. The second thing is when talking to Ms. Narlock, one thing I was concerned about is the time to start. And this says on or before, so I'm thinking we might move it forward. Because March 31st is way too far out. I think Mr. Dial would agree with that. The second thing is, I think the idea of bidding on the move, that makes sense to me. Get the best bid to move. I have no idea what it'll cost, but I don't think it would be right to expect him to foot the bill for that completely. Every job I've relocated for, they normally do something similar to this. One thing, I've seen some misinformation about the additional benefits. I've had people call me and ask about him wanting money up front, like a sign-on bonus. I don't believe that's what this is. It looks like he's asking for 2 weeks of annual leave in addition to the normal annual leave. So not normal, but the base. And I think that's a pretty standard thing with executives. When you take a job, you normally don't get the base entry level leave. As a matter of fact, I think that's pretty reasonable looking at the whole situation. This is a negotiation though. It's not a you give me yours and then that's just what we go with. So I would be good with doing one of two things. I think coming back with an offer to him and saying, here's what we would counter you at. We made an offer, he countered that, we counter. And so I would come back and say, could you start February 15? I think that would be fair. And then the base salary 130, but I think we got to put something in there for that. And I think what we should do is go with a longer initial term. I think we should make it a 3-year contract, back to the point that was made by the audience. And I said this to both of our finalists. It's just like hiring a football coach. You got 3 years. If you don't do what you need to do in 3 years, you're going to be unemployed. And if you look, even if you do it, you need to in 3 years to be unemployed. If you look at the NFL, that happens all the time where coaches with winning records are let go. But I think we need to show a commitment for stability. So I would say, if he'll give a little bit on salary, we could give a little bit on time. And that way give a little bit on each side. That's my thoughts on the initial offer.
Well, at first when I heard the 140, I thought, well, that's kind of high. But then I got looking at his resume, his experience, city managers we've had in the past. Again, we can count him, and I agree with you, Todd, on the 130 and work out the difference between. So I would make a counter offer of 130 and to start work, with the starting date, like you were saying, and just go from there.
That's an aggressive starting date.
Maybe March 1st.
I would be okay with March 1st. That still shaves 30 days off of it. But I mean, I think we want to show that we want to be aggressive in getting him started. We can't really start building stability within the overall staff, and in our relationships with the county and all the other relationships until we have someone in place. So I think the sooner he can start, the better. But I definitely don't want to see it March 31. So maybe split the difference on that and go with March 1st. I'd be fine with that. But let them know that it will be possible to do it sooner if we can get the background check completed sooner.
And the 120, the reason I think I was the one that even mentioned that number is because that's the number we've been using, and that was just a starting figure. That was not what I thought we would be at. And as you said, we did even budget 130 before, so that's kind of more what I was expecting him to just be at. And the relocation expenses, I think if we look at the estimates, I think, and I think he's, looking at coming in, and the 2 weeks, most people that are executives and all work to get things done, and that they don't just take off like somebody that just says, hey, I'm gone for a week. Even if they're gone, they're still working. So most times they don't even get to use all that time. So, and that's in line with what I think we've done before too.
one other point, his performance evaluation, I think it's important that he brings that up front. I like what he's proposing on an annual evaluation, and from talking to him when he was here, having set goals laid out at a meeting, a workshop. I think that makes sense. And that way he's got a clear vision of what the entire council wants him to do. And moving forward, then that's what he's going to be evaluated on. I think it takes out subjectivity a lot too, because you lay out the goals in advance and you know what you're working toward. I think in the past we've had a lack of vision. And so, now we have weak managers, just to be clear, but without a common vision of what we want to see happen as a community and as a council, we're setting them up for failure. So I think his idea of having a goal setting and then an annual evaluation based on those goals makes sense.
And I would even go 135 on the salary if he could get started on it, because I don't think we can nickel and dime it. We want quality. We're not shopping for bargain.
With that too, if we go with the longer term, like say a 3-year term, I would still offer an annual review with possibility, performance increase.
Right.
And I could see that if he could say February 15th, I'd go to 135. Annualized, I think it'd fit within the budget because we've already had a quarter where we've been below the 130. So it wouldn't affect the budget for this fiscal year.
Mr. Mayor, I have no opposition to the 130 amount, but I do, as has previously mentioned about starting time. I certainly will not like that to be March 31st. In March, we need him as soon as we can get him. Personally, would like to have him here sooner than March 1st, but I can live with that March 1st day. But beyond that, I think it gets to be a little sticky and cumbersome. I think we need to narrow it to a date so that we can confirm what we're offering him in terms of a start date. And one of the other things that caught my attention was I get the health benefits or the life insurance benefits. I don't know. I think there's a waiting period before the benefits actually start, I think. And if I understand it correctly, he wanted it to start immediately from day one that he begins work and that type of thing. And the other one was life insurance, I think it was. I think standard employees is what, 50,000? 50,000. And I just feel that we need to, he should fall up under that umbrella whenever we do for our general employees.
What's the cost differential on life insurance above? Is there a maximum that employees can get?
Well, obviously, as you age, it's gonna be higher, but the $50,000 is because the IRS, that's their cutoff. And so if you have any life insurance that you provide an employee that's over $50,000, it will be taxable to them.
So if we knew the cost of that insurance, the difference over the 50, we could make it as part of his compensation.
I don't have that. They probably have that amount in HR. So you could check with HR and find out what that cost level is.
I think the cost would be important to know, but I do know it's pretty standard in executive contracts to look for a key life. I'm not even sure that we shouldn't hold life insurance sometimes on our executives. I know on other boards I've sat on, the executive director had a policy that paid back to the organization in case they went. So it's not a bad idea, and I could see why he would ask for that. As far as like the benefits beginning the first day, I'm sure there's probably some waiver we could do on that. Is that correct? Yeah, I think we've done that in the past for.
Yeah, the council would just have to authorize it. Yeah, that's what we had.
Okay.
But it's not typical for staff. Typically, they don't
Right.
get benefits right up front. There's a wait period.
But I know there was even a
60
wait
days.
period for when.
Yeah.
For elected officials. So
So that'd have to be something that's above and beyond that would.
I can see that because if he's paying his own insurance, and with the way our insurance program is screwed up in this country, once you get that job and you report it, depending on if you have affordable health insurance, there's a good chance, and that's what most, if you buy your own insurance, that's probably what you have, then there's a good chance he'd lose it once he has the job. So there's a gap time. So it makes sense, I would think, to do that. One other thing about the speed of time of him getting here, I know we're just starting the background check, and we could possibly streamline that. I noticed when we were going through the 4 candidates way back, I had searched them online. I know he had a Florida background check done previously, and I'm wondering if it would be a little cheaper and easier if we just had that certified to us and had it just brought forward from that date forward with the police department. Would that save us some time?
Yes, it would.
Okay.
And I think it'd save us some costs too. So in my opinion, I would be for that. I've read that background report. There's nothing in there that was a red flag to me. And it might be if he has anything further or we need to negotiate, it might be the next step will be a meeting, like a Zoom meeting, and have him here and we could go back and forth that way maybe if we can't work it out.
All right, and as far as insurance and those benefits, our offer could be when it's available. If it's available immediately, or we can make it that way, but if it takes a while, then our offer is to do what we can legally do. All right. Is there consensus to make a motion? Now, about him residing in the city, we've done that in the past. But I know the housing market is really tough right now to say you can buy something in the city. What y'all's position on that?
I would like to see him live in the city.
Well, I would recommend you start in the city, but if you can't find anything in the city.
Then he could come to us.
Yeah, starting the search in the city. I think we all live in the city. I mean, there's housing, there's just not enough housing, which is an issue. We need more housing and we need to expand the city size for sure. But I mean, if at all possible, if he could live in the city, that'd be ideal.
Okay. Then, but if he could come to us and say, I can't find it.
I know where there's a house right down our street for sale. I saw the sign this morning, but it won't be there long.
Mayor, the other, I'm sorry, excuse me. The other thing that you had briefly touched on the other day, or Ms. Narlock had said about the relocation expenses, is also to build in a contingency in there. If they leave within a certain amount of time.
Right.
Is that something that you guys need to talk about today? That those relocation expenses would be reimbursed to the city?
What y'all see?
I would say if he's moving this distance, once he moves his family here, moves his wife here, I mean, he's here. Would we make him pay that back? I mean, maybe we could put a clause if he's terminated for cause, possibly. I don't know, but it really, is that even collectible normally? I guess you could get a judgment or a lien or.
The cost on a severance package, if it's in the severance, and the definition of severance is rather vague, but a severance is generally not reimbursable. If it's due to misconduct under the unemployment compensation chapter, which that number escapes me at this moment, but if it meets definition of misconduct, then the severance can be disputed. The question becomes, what do you define as severance or not as severance? While I have the microphone, I'll go back to a 3-year commitment. The general rule in Florida is that you cannot commit past an appropriation fiscal year without voter approval. But I will check on that as it relates to an employment agreement.
Okay.
So the way you generally get around that in Florida, whenever we do these larger contracts, is that we put an appropriations clause that we often see at the federal and state level all the time, which is that even though this may be a multiple year contract, it is subject to appropriations by the legislative body each year. So, but I will check on that, Councilmember Sims.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Mr. Levingood, then Mr. Warren.
I would just recommend, the attorney can tell you the best way to do it or not do it, is to have something in the contract agreement that says, that you have the ability to release him from his duties, even though it isn't for misconduct. For example, if he comes in and has a real strong personality that you guys discover you can't deal with, all right? He didn't tell you what to do, but just his demeanor and how he goes about doing his job gives you pause and concern. That's a reason for maybe not wanting him around. You need to have some way to be able to trigger that and not have to pay him all the severance package that goes with it. Okay, that's a little bit of vetting to find out, if he's a guy that everybody got along with, or whether he's a bullheaded individual that wants to do it his way, even though you tell him the way to do it. Okay?
Okay. All right, Mr. Warren.
Mr. Mayor, I'm extremely disappointed in you, and I'm disappointed in the council when you have citizens that come up here, and people like myself and many others, we come to all the council meetings, no matter what time they are, and participate. And we spent about $20,000 on hiring a headhunter, or whatever you want to call Ms. Norlock, and to sit here and let Mr. Thomas be insulted by certain comments about not properly being vetted. Well, why we spent almost $20,000? Isn't this the firm that we all voted on that said that he would be vetted? Backgrounds hadn't come in. And if a person came up to the podium, wouldn't it be your job, Mr. Mayor, to explain that Mr. Thomas have been properly vetted by a firm such as Ms. Norlock that we paid this type of money for?
We are doing
I understand.
vetting.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor. Go ahead.
I was just saying that, yes, we are doing a thorough vetting. I thought everybody understood that.
I think that should have been made from the diocese to the citizens up here, because obviously they were not a part of coming to the meeting, and they're in the fourth quarter with a few seconds left on the clock. We've gone through a lot of this process about trying to find a city manager. Also, in saying that, I think it's important that, like you said, that we don't nickel and dime this particular candidate. I think that's number one. Number two, we're setting hardline timelines that we say that we want him in Lake City to be our city manager, but there's still some things left. You got to counter offer, so there's some time back and forth. And if you start setting dates and the counter offers hadn't been negotiated, then you're still pushing that timeline out past February and possibly sometime past March. And so until we know what we're going to pay him, what he's going to accept, when are we going to really start that timeline as to when we want to hit him? Because at some point it becomes very unreasonable if we get an agreement on February the 14th, then we want him here on February the 15th.
Right, and that's the case. All of it.
Thank you.
All right, council, what do we?
Mr. Mayor, I have one more comment about a comment that was made earlier. So as part of the vetting process and the interview, some of the points you brought up were asked. His resume, that period of time where he was not in city government, and I thought his answer to that was really good. It made sense, but again, there's still continued vetting to do. And so that's this final piece we were just talking about. I think it needs to be part of the motion as well. So I would make the motion.
Mr. Sampson, may I interject for a moment before you get to a motion? That I think it'll be changing now and then. And when we do get to the point of a motion, it's really to sum up what the council has said here today so that Mr. Thomas can hear it and review it and
That's right.
deliberate it within himself and his family. That was part of what Mr. Thomas didn't have an issue with, but that's what took some time last week, is that we went around and around and we didn't really give him any specifics, which was fine, because the consensus appeared to be that we'd like to get some specifics from him of what he wants. And the term negotiable was mentioned by Mr. Sampson and others last meeting, saying that what was being presented to him at that meeting was certainly negotiable. Mr. Thomas did want something in writing. It was very hard to put something in writing when there wasn't anything finite coming out of the council last time. So again, the motion will be something more finite in response to these negotiable terms. Now, before we get there, a couple of questions. As to severance, the discussion briefly with Mr. Sampson a moment ago reminded me of a couple of contracts that I've seen that if you want something to be reimbursable or the severance to be reimbursable, severance to be negotiable, relocation to be reimbursable, you would put percentages on it. For example, a severance, you may offer a certain amount of weeks if someone is let go by a 3-2 vote. That's it's the lowest majority needed. However, if it was unanimous because of such a poor performance or some other egregious act, then they would receive a much less amount of severance. Those are just things for you to consider if you're thinking about reimbursable expenses or performance-related expenses or terms. That's not a suggestion towards Mr. Thomas or for this contract. The next thing, the relocation expenses. I have here that at least 2 council members were fine with the 3 lowest. You really need to think about when those quotes will be gathered, because you don't know what the expenses will be 2 months from now, 3 months from now, or within the next 2 weeks. So you really want 3 lowest bids by a certain date. Then it would be up to Mr. Thomas to determine when he wishes to move. Along with those, a time frame on when those bids would be gathered, a time frame on a move, if you want to have that as a consideration. I'm gathering that there would be no probationary period, so the benefits would start as soon as possible. Gathering that the salary range would be somewhere around 130, perhaps 135, depending upon availability. The residency location is still widely negotiable. This does not need to be in a motion. You'll want to consider it after the motion. Do you want to schedule a special meeting in the near future, which could be canceled as necessary, but also to review the background if needed? Or do you want to simply allow council members to call a special meeting after you've individually reviewed the background if you feel necessary? So we can discuss that after any motions to relay to Mr. Thomas the actual terms of his agreement. So those are the things that we've heard over the past 2 meetings and from Ms. Narlock and among yourselves, and things to be considered, perhaps discussed a little bit more or put into a motion sometime.
Okay. Anything else to council?
I'd like to make a motion on that. So I'd like to make a motion in response. I'll read it just like the letter he gave, that the start date would be March 1 with the base salary of 130. Agree to the 3 bids with the lowest bid, and I think putting the time frame on it or just put a time frame on it that the bids will be in by the time of the start of the contract. That the benefits will begin the first day of employment, that the 2 weeks annual leave will be added, that the annual evaluation based on the goals will be set during the public meeting, and that the life insurance equal to annual salary will be provided.
What about the one-way tickets?
I would agree to add that to the motion as well. The one-way ticket for him to start work.
Anything else? Okay, that's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion by council? Ms. Sykes, you call the roll.
Mayor, there was, I just want to make sure we are not going to address residency. Is that correct?
I think we said we'd like him to if he can.
Did you say that in your motion?
Well, we can add that to the motion. We'd like for him to live in the city if at all possible.
But if he finds something that's not available, then we could consider.
Okay. I just want to make sure I have that written down. All right, Mr. Sampson,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Jefferson.
Yes.
Mayor Whit.
Yes. Okay, I think that takes care of this.
Mayor,
Yes.
should we go ahead and set a special meeting to be on the record for his response? Is there a time frame? How long did it take for him to respond last time?
Oh, he, of course, had the amount of time to think about things since your meeting. So
Right.
he can be watching now or he can review it today. He certainly knows there's a meeting this morning. The question is, why don't you provide him now a time to respond? For example, I can tell you that last Saturday, I was told that he would like something in writing. Very difficult to put something in writing based off of what the council was thinking last meeting because there wasn't anything finite. And on Sunday, I asked him how long he needed to respond. And he provided the date. I didn't want to be so presumptuous to put a burden on him. I don't know what he may be dealing with, any of us are dealing with day to day. So I called him in again and asked him. So you might want to ask for a date.
Well, I wouldn't make it a drop dead date, but I'd like, if he possibly could, by Wednesday. And if he needs more time for some reason, he can always say, hey, I need a couple more days or whatever.
Well, if we gave him till Wednesday, we could set the meeting for Thursday. If that would work. Now, the second part of that is the background check piece. Would it be done by,
I'll have both investigators start Monday morning to get it done as fast as possible.
but that does have to be completed beforehand. But we could still negotiate the contract details, and perhaps at that meeting Thursday, we should have him on a Zoom. Will someone reach out to him and let him know that, or would that be?
Mr. Caroline, I think.
Yeah, I think
We
so.
can certainly ask him to attend the Zoom meeting. Just need to know, obviously, the time.
6 o'clock Thursday.
6 o'clock. Does that work for everybody else?
Yes, it works for me.
Thursday.
When does the county meet?
They're not meeting Thursday because that's that day. Everybody's going to Tallahassee, but
Okay, I am attending that. Would we be back by 6, you think?
that evening.
County days is Thursday, so could we do it Friday then?
I'm gonna be out of town Friday.
We do have a council meeting the following Monday.
Yeah. Let's just
We
leave
could
it.
do it. Let's have it then on that meeting, I guess, Monday.
Yeah, and if we need to
Give us a
before
good day.
we might just can call
On
it.
a regular meeting then?
Yeah.
Add to the regular meeting agenda. Is that what I'm hearing everybody say?
Yeah, just at the regular meeting, unless we just, for whatever reason, he may get back to us quicker, we may,
But you would like his response by next Wednesday.
if we could.
So that special call meeting be February.
It won't be a special call meeting, it'll be just a regular
council meeting.
council meeting on whatever next Monday is.
The 8th.
7.
So,
7.
all right. Mr. Caroline, we took care of that issue. You said there was something else we need to bring up after that.
Well, you took care of that also with the meeting.
Okay, all right. So we're good. All right, and if there's nothing else for this meeting, we'll be adjourned. We'll take a 5-minute break before we go into the workshop.